In this video, we'll be looking in more detail at the final decision-making process we saw in the decision-making video. I realize that there are a number of steps in the process, and the intent of this video is to walk you through the process in a way that you can understand and implement. This process is by far the most complex one that I will be presenting in the course, so don't be put off if it takes a bit of understanding, because everything else is easier. Also, if you don't need to make complex decisions that involve subjective or non-measurable factors, you could just skip this video. So, we have the mind map with the probabilistic outcome from applying values to the potential outcomes and multiplying them by the probability of that outcome happening, and then adding them all together to give a value and subtracting the cost of implementing that option to end up with a beneficial value. In our example, this gave the highest value to starting an affiliate program. Now we want to add other factors that we can't measure in the same terms as we could with the probabilistic outcome. In this case, that means that we can't measure them directly in dollar terms. They are more subjective and multifactored elements of the potential solution. The first thing that we need to do is to work out the relative importance of each of these factors. This reflects the reality that not all factors are equally important to our decision. In this example, we're saying that we want the results as quickly as possible. To assess the relative importance of the different factors, we could just assign each one a number, but often that's difficult, so we have a process that allows us to break down the calculation of the weighting factors into single comparisons between two factors, and the only question that we need to ask is, how much more or less important is this than that? To do this, we need to have a spreadsheet that we can use to calculate the values. Starting off with an empty table like this, the first thing that we can do is fill in each of the cells on the diagonals with the value 1, because anything compared to itself is going to be equal. After doing this, the table looks like this. Now compare the importance of the short-term impact with the importance of the implementation speed. In this case, let's say that the short-term impact is more important than the implementation speed. So we look up our table of values and we decide that a short-term impact is just somewhat more important than implementation speed and assign it a value of 3, like this. Now, it makes sense that if we compare the values the other way round and look at the relative importance of implementation speed to short-term impact, then it's going to be somewhat less important. So we would put a value of 1/3 or 0.333 like this. This is always going to be the case. When you compare two elements in the reverse direction, the value is going to be the inverse. Next, we compare the importance of the long-term impact with the importance of the implementation speed and decide that the long-term impact is much more important than the implementation speed, so we give it a value of 7, and the opposite comparison a value of 1/7 or 0.14. And finally, we make the comparison between the importance of long-term impact and short-term impact, and decide that long-term impact is very much less important than short-term impact, so we assign it a value of 1/9 or 0.11. Now we have the values in there, all we need to do is work out the actual importance factors to apply to our decision. We do that by first adding up each column in the table. So our first column would be 1 plus 3 plus 7, which equals 11. And so on, like this. Now you can see that we have also created another table below, and we'll record the actual relative importance of the individual factors by taking the value of each cell and dividing it by the total for that column and putting the result in the same position in the table below. Our first column would therefore be 1/11 or 0.09, then 3/11 or 0.27, and 7/11 or 0.64, and we do the same for all the cells to end up with a table like this. And finally, to calculate the priority vector, we average each row. So for the first row, it will be 0.09 plus 0.23 plus 0.01 divided by 3 gives us the average value of 0.11. And we do the same for each row, like this. I sometimes get asked how accurate you need to be with the numbers in the spreadsheet, so let's look at an example where we change the value of short-term impact to 5. The end result is that implementation speed has gone from 0.11 to 0.08, the short-term impact has gone from 0.62 to 0.68, and the long-term impact has gone from 0.27 to 0.24. So yes, there is some impact, but just one small factor like that is unlikely to have a huge impact on what decision you make, and the more factors you're considering, the less impact one item will be. So you can work quite happily with your best guess for each item. So now we have factors which allow us to compare the different items, but for each option we're considering implementing, we need to have a way of assessing how good an option this is for each of the factors we're interested in. To do this, we take each factor in turn and use exactly the same method of assessment that we've just used for assessing the relative importance of the different factors. And so first we would take the implementation speed and assess how good each of the options is in terms of implementation speed, like this. We've already gone through the actual values in the main video, but essentially what we're saying is that the fastest thing to implement is the internet advertising. Then we need to do the same for short-term impact, and we have the following figures. And again, internet advertising is the best option, and we do the same for long-term impact, like this. And we find that the long-term impact of internet advertising and an affiliate program is going to be equal, and the long-term impact of print advertising is much less. So now we take the weighting factor for each option, and this is exactly what was shown in the branches on the previous video, but we'll do it in a spreadsheet format here. Now you multiply the weighting factor by the priority vector, and that gives you a factor, and then you add up all the factors like this. And that's our multiplication factor that we apply to the value that we've already worked out for our internet advertising option. And you would do the same for each of the other factors that you're considering. Then you would multiply by the probabilistic beneficial value you calculated for that option and come up with a decision based on the final number. In the case of internet advertising, that would be 0.62 times 16,200, which gives you an answer of 10,400. When you have done this, it may well change your decision. In the case of our example, the fact that it was more important for us to get an immediate return on investment meant that the decision was changed from setting up an affiliate program to internet advertising. Again, if you change one factor slightly, it's only going to have a small impact on the outcome, so just make the best estimate of the outcome for the option and factor that you're considering. One of the great powers of this is that you can pretty easily make a good enough assessment of the comparison between two options, and each comparison only swings the values slightly, so that in the end you end up with a pretty accurate representation of the values of the options. But what if you only have non-measurable subjective factors? Well, you can use just the factor that you've calculated for that option as your decision. So hopefully this has taken you through the process in sufficient detail so that you'll be able to work through any decision that you need to make and be confident in the outcome that you've worked out to be the best.